Hello, David McMillan here, and I've just watched the first of my jail survival guides, and it seems to me there's some quite useful information in there, but I don't think I really set the scene very well. So this is not really part 2, it's 1.5 or something, who knows. But I think it's useful to know something about how depressing jails are. Not just prisons, I'm talking about the very first places you get taken. In a sense, you get taken to the worst place first. And then, well, let me take you there. Police arrest you, talk, holding cell. Now, the holding cell at a police station, generally, as we speak in 2021, is quite clean, perhaps too clean, stripped clean. It has a camera. You have a mattress, the kind that can be hosed down, as in always uncomfortable and shiny plastic. Yes, for obvious reasons. They just want to be able to sponge it out every so often. But it also creaks and rolls every time you're on it. You get a blanket or two if you're a real complainer. But somehow you're never quite warm. Yet stifling at the same time. You won't be in there for too long. Unless you're a murderer, you might be in there for 3 or 4 days. Because a magistrate, that's the lowest level of judge, will have to agree to you being held longer than 24 hours without a specific charge. So, when you go before that magistrate after 24 hours, the charge is read out. You don't have to plead anything to it. The discussion is, can you stay or can you go? No, you must stay. Why? Because police always object to it. Now, stay where exactly? In the police station? No. You go back to that little cell and, the clean one with the light on 24/7. And then a small van will take you out to the, what would you call it, Remand Prison. It's supposed to be like that. Remand prisoners are meant to stay by themselves, not mixed with convicted ones. Doesn't mean anything these days. Now, in the United Kingdom, there was a kind of a tradition. Well, when I was about, 20 or so, we're talking about just about after television was invented. Anyway, remand prisoners were not guilty of anything, and that carried some weight. What it meant in practical terms was that you went to a big place like Brixton. It was London's major remand prison, and it was hugely overcrowded, even if I recall it in the 70s. You could keep your own clothes. In fact, you could have your meals brought in. You didn't have to eat the prison slops, and it was pretty much slop then. Now it got worse. Yeah, and I think you were entitled to, now this is true, a certain 2 pints of beer or 1 pint of beer a day. That tradition held for quite a long time. You could also get, loads of stuff, books, small electrical items, radio. There weren't too many stations in those days, and people listened to AM radio. But that kind of dried up. You could have visits every day too on remand. What a riot that was. The visiting room was packed. So much contraband changed hands, it was whatever you want. Some people used to decline bail, professional robbers and whatnot, so they'd spend as much time as possible on remand because they caught up with the latest gossip, could see their friends coming in, could eat what they wanted, smoke, drink. Yeah, it was fine. The tradition really goes back to, I suppose, the Second World War, when I think his name was Walter Mosley, was it? Anyway, it was a black shirt Nazi fascist pig, but he was of a certain class. And he managed to get not merely conjugal visits. I think his wife was able to stay in his private little cell there. And check that one out. Oswald Mosley. That's it. But all those good things came to an end. Why? Because there was an excuse. The prison guards didn't like it. Now, in the United States, different thing altogether. There's various kinds of holding tanks and county jail, and I'll detail the levels in a later program, but this is not what I wanted to talk about just in this moment. It's how depressing the place is. Out of all the most depressing rooms in the world, I don't mean I'll keep out of the area of places they keep you when being tortured. That's in another league altogether. The most depressing police cells are not actually those. When you go to the first court of hearing, and then you're remanded, that is, to be sent to be kept in jail, there's a cell where just about everybody is wandering around, crouching because the seats are so filthy, rank, spat upon, slimed upon, used for eating off when nothing else would do, used for chopping up bits of tobacco and mixing things and wiping boogers on. So, crouching or leaning against a wall, which is not much better. It's dark, damp, smells the kind of stench you you might remember from those childhood outside of the school building shelters, which had a rank mixture of old banana skins and faintly shit, but definitely piss. The things, hopeless things written on the walls there. Written, scratched, eked out by any device that's a sharpened stick. And if that fails, the cigarette lighter or match burning, sending off black clouds, and then used to write on the wall. Such and such was here. Some gang name. Oh, and those who had a pen sometimes wrote a poem or made a long speech about the person who informed upon him, the stoolie, wanting everybody who passed through that holding cell to know that Ichabod Mudd was a fink and dirty no-good rat bastard motherfucking cunt, all of those kind of things. And gave dates, referred to some of the factoids that somehow might alert the world by the newspaper broadcast stream of the prison wall that Ichabod was not to be trusted. That seems to go on for hours because you're waiting for something that you don't want, but where you are is so bad. Why? Because people keep coming. Guys come in who are being held for non-payment of fines. They pace around as though their life has come to an end until their girl or father or uncle or mother comes and pays those fines and they're out. So for those 2 hours, you'd think their life had come to an end. They're positively suicidal, but they want company in their misery and they'll tell you all about it and bark at you with their dehydrated, rank breath. There's only so much you can take of that. Sometimes you have to make a point about it. Then there are those returning from the lowest of the low courts, and they can only be sentenced to, well, certainly a maximum of 4 years in the UK. But that rarely happens anyway. They usually get a bond or guarantee to keep the peace, a fine, some kind of probation. But from time to time they'll get 6 months, 12 months for something incredibly stupid, and not the first time, probably the 10th, and not before a whole lot of probations and bonds and talkings to, until the lower court judge can really see no other way out and says, well, off to jail you go. So that 6 or 9 months, which will be filtered down in the jail system to probably 3, that's going to be the end of the world for that fellow. Look, everybody was young once, and the first time something bad happens to you, you feel like it's the end of the world. And in a sense it is. But you don't have to push it on everybody in your path. Now this room fills up, and you're just waiting because you know you're going someplace which is at least bigger, and maybe someplace you can grab a cigarette because people are not supposed to keep theirs, and the few that have them guard them and grudgingly part with them. I didn't smoke in those days, not in the beginning. The really depressing part, though, is that the people who come in, for the most part, are released. They leave. Charlie, your lawyer's here. Good, go up. Guy's gone. Joe, it's all been sorted at the front desk. The thing's been paid. He's gone. Gone. You and a couple of other non-talkers are the only ones left. And then you're handcuffed and put into a van and banged around the roads. Now, in the old days, you were all in a van together. It was the moment to actually start talking, because you wanted to know what to expect on the ground when you arrived at this place, what the searches were like, what you could get away with, what to avoid. There would be somebody in that van who'd spent some time there, for sure. And all the eager students were there listening to the few but important words that this person had to say about wherever the hell you were going. I suppose in New York it might have been Rikers Island. That's a holding prison, of course. In the UK, London, I mean, Wandsworth, Wormwood Scrubs. Names that are famous in their own pathetic way. Still, if you've already been through those places, you're at least glad to get away from that depressing place. But there is still a long stretch before you. When you arrive at the prison, you wait in the van for 1 hour, 2 hours, sometimes 3, until the slow grind of the machinery that processes incoming prisoners takes place. And that goes on, you're taken off there. It's handcuffs on, handcuffs off. Oh, by the way, these days they don't like to put a whole lot of prisoners in one dark and bumpy van together. They'll put them in a dark and bumpy, individual, tiny little microscopic prison van cells. You'll see these little windows, like some kind of cubist aircraft on the ground crawling along. And behind every one of those windows is a cell that's not big enough to stand up in, not big enough to turn around in. It has a sort of a seat, hard plastic in the wrong shape. But that's so that the prisoners can't kill each other until permission is given, which is not really until late that night or the next day, when they're vaguely left alone. Left alone, neglected, in different cells. But off the van, when you come off the van, you think, at least I can get processed. Yeah, that's not happening. Those 3 hours in the van waiting to get off only puts you into another holding cell within the reception prison. And you wait there. It's called intake in some US prisons. And it's a kind of cell which has got either heavy perspex or smash-resistant glass, and probably a TV behind a rigid box that never works. Or works too well. You can't turn it down, you can't turn it up. Part of the punishment, it begins early. This little room, nothing happens. You wait and wait to get processed. If you wait too long, they start to bring around food. Can you eat it? Possibly some part of it. Depends where and when and what, but you can bet your left testicle that food was cooked at least 6 hours ago. Or heated up. It was cooked months ago before it was frozen. It's probably not the worst food you've ever had. Strictly speaking, the worst food you've ever had would be in a courtroom holding cell during trial or hearings. They have two kinds of things. They have vegetarian lasagna, beef lasagna, and something called all-day breakfast. The difference between any of them is that all-day breakfast has 2 tubes of something that have been manufactured to resemble sausages. There's no egg involved, and you're thankful for that. The world is thankful for that. It's all-day breakfast because they give it to you all day if you so choose. Another reason, it's been sitting around all day, stewing away in its irreparable plastic. Even the policeman, court officer who gives it out, even if his life is the most miserable, disappointing, failure-ridden life imaginable by any human being, if he has no other pleasure in life, it would be one thing, wheeling that trolley from holding cell to holding cell and saying, "What would you like? All-day breakfast, vegetarian lasagna, or beef lasagna?" Now, he can be sarcastic in another way, or he could be grunting. But it doesn't matter, because he knows if you accept any of that, you are in for some horror. I'm just smiling because I took one of the varieties of lasagna once, and I was given a plastic knife and fork. Well, the plastic fork just shattered on impact trying to get into this thing. And as for the knife, well, it was Excalibur. Any man who could withdraw that knife from the lasagna became King of England. But I digress. You're still waiting around in this holding cell in the prison, where people tell you various depressing things, such as they've been going to court for 10 years on a long extradition. That actually happened to me. I was being sent back to Turkey. Oh, he was sent back in the end. Nobody wins an extradition, they say. Well, they weren't entirely correct. Nonetheless, a depressing place. Then you get processed, and just even the snarky, insulting, intrusive officers who the screws are going to filter through your clothes and generally make a mess of everything and ask you questions that are all traps, but I've gone into that elsewhere. Even they seem like, at least it's a conversation, even if it is defensive and horrible, because you're going back to another fucking holding cell until you get allocated to somewhere, and it's late at night by the time you actually move from there with a bundle of crap, a few bits of your own stuff, and probably some ill-fitting uniform. Yeah, that's about the strength of that, yeah. So you waddle around with this stuff, and where do you go? You follow with this officer as he tries to find some place to put you, as he trails from wing to wing, having the night duty officer say, "We're full, mate. No, take him." Eventually, you come full circle, and they open a door, and you wonder why you've gone right around to a door that you could have been put behind probably an hour earlier. Why? Well, there's a perfectly good reason. As uncaring as almost all of the staff are there, even they didn't want to put you behind this door because you're not alone. What waits for you in there is an abomination, is barely human. It doesn't seem to be making a lot of noise in the darkness. And why is there darkness? It shouldn't be. Well, he smashed the lights a long time ago. And as you wade gently through the broken detritus of the kettle and the remains of a TV, and probably 23 old plastic plates of food that he hasn't bothered to take out, you look at the top bunk because this critter, under these reeking blankets has taken the bottom one and think, well, at least I'll be high up, out of the thing's way when it stirs. The officer shakes his head, looks on almost with sympathy, and closes the door, saying, try not to ring, try not to hit the alarm. Then locks. And then nothing happens until later. So, there you have it. The little run-through of the most depressing places on God's earth. So, if I'm giving you a lot of tips as to how to deal with jail and make it easier, and I will, let's not forget what kind of places these are. Onward, perhaps next time, probably. Long enough for tonight. Call this part 2, next one part 3. Good night.